Hello, everybody. I'm Sudeshna, CEO MARG Business Transformation. Firstly, I welcome you all to this webinar today and thank you so much. We are sincerely grateful to all of you for all your responses and this continuous engagement from part one of this webinar to the part two, which we are doing today. Thank you for that. We are MARG Business Transformation, the training and now a consulting organization which focuses on change, people, and organization culture. We are the primary affiliates of Prosci in the Indian subcontinent. Prosci, the world leaders in change management, they provide us robust, structured, and research-based methodology to lead and manage change. The ATKAR model being the building block for all of this. In the current research pursuits of Prosci, they have chosen the most trending topic, which lands in the conversation of all of us or dominates all our conversation in meeting rooms these days. Artificial intelligence. Yes. So today we shall hear our speakers here talk about AI and change management and the research findings of Prosci for that. Our speakers are Dr. Scott Anderson, the Senior Principal of Research and Analytics at Prosci. With more than a decade and a half experience in deploying change management and in strategy, he has been deploying change management at an enterprise level in his earlier engagements, and now he leads the global research for Prosci. His work focuses on enterprise implementations, and change analytics, and obviously he helps organizations succeed in the people side of change by getting it right the first time. Welcome, Scott. And with Scott, we have in discussion today Krish. Krish is the director and founder of MARG and also your Prosci Change Advanced Instructor. So some of you in the call may have been certified by him. Krish, as a leader earlier across industries of IT, GBS, oil and gas, has done change in a variety of ways, and now he leads our consulting service at MARG on change. AI without change leadership and change management may become a very expensive tech, which at this juncture of the amount of investments which we have gone in from our end in organizations, we cannot afford. So let us go to our speakers and hear from them and learn how to steer this transformation to the greatest impact. So over to you, Scott. You can share your slides now.
Thank you very much, Sudeshna. It is a privilege to be here and to take this time to be with you. Let me just verify here that I'm sharing my screen and that we are good. Fantastic. I'm excited to be able to share with you some of our AI adoption research that we've done recently. Before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of a sense of who I am. So you can get to know me a little bit. First, one of my most important roles is I am a husband and a father to 6 boys. They occupy most of my time and a lot of my world. I've lived in a few places, primarily based in the US. I did live in Argentina for a period of a couple of years, lived in Hawaii for a period, which was a lovely place to live. I received my PhD at the University of Texas at Austin. Following that, one of the things that I've done most recently was that I led the enterprise change deployment at Western Governors University. So I've acted in both the role of a change practitioner as well as leading that enterprise change capability within an organization. Finally, just a key moment that I had, it was back in 2014, I attended a conference where I heard about change management for the first time. And that's where I came across Prosci's research, and I was given a copy of their research. I remember it vividly because I sat down with a copy of Prosci's best practices in change management research report, And I sat down in Las Vegas in this red big chair and just read that for 3 hours. And that became kind of a hinge point and a pivotal moment in my own career, was coming across this research that Prosci was doing. So for me, it is an absolute privilege to be able to share with you some of the same research that benefited me so tremendously in the subsequent years. So today, what I want to talk about is I want to talk about AI and organizations and how do we look at it. Then I want to get into the AI adoption research, and then we'll end up with talking about some next steps. I think Sudeshna gave a great introduction to Prosci, a little bit of who we are, talking about the ADKAR model. I don't feel like we need to go over that again, other than to know that it is a worldwide model that is making a difference in organizations and their ability to achieve success. When we look at what we're trying to accomplish, we're all about creating capability and not dependency. So the way that I think about it is, rather than lighting a lamp for someone each night, we want people to learn how to light their own lamps. We really want to foster that capability in them. So with that said, let me just jump straight into the findings. If I were to boil it down, what did we find in this research that we did? If you are somebody who is in a position where you're leading an AI implementation, or your executive leaders are leading an AI implementation, I'm hopeful that what I can give you here will help you to answer some of the questions that they may have. So if you're leading an AI implementation, should you manage AI centrally or let teams manage it on their own? Based on our findings, centrally managed AI is related to smoother AI implementations. Should you have your AI tools be chosen by individuals or by the organization? Based on the research, individual-led choice of AI is actually associated with better adoption outcomes. Should you go big with AI and go all in? Or is it better to go with these smaller incremental steps as you're getting into this AI world? Based on our research findings, it was actually the big transformative AI projects that tended to go smoother than the smaller ones. Another question, should I have just a few AI experts, or should I look at building this widespread AI expertise across the organization? Again, based on the research, it was widespread organizational AI expertise that actually was tied to smoother AI implementations. Another question, should I build internal AI skills and capability, or should I go out and rely on external AI help to come into the organization? Based on our research, it was actually the internal AI skills that were more aligned with a smoother AI implementation. A few more questions. If I'm going to be leading an AI implementation, should I focus on how to install AI, so the installation, or should I focus on how to help employees adopt and use AI? Our research showed that most challenges, and look at this number with AI, at 63%, are about the human factors of implementation. This would suggest that AI is fundamentally a human adoption issue and not so much a technology issue. It's easy to put the technology in, but getting people to use it and adopt it is the real challenge. So if, again, I'm leading an AI implementation, should I provide training to the employees about how to write AI prompts and how to use the AI? We would say yes. When we look at challenges in AI implementation, the number one challenge was user proficiency. So their ability to actually get in and have the ability to use this new technology. And then one other question that we look at here is, as an organization, given that AI is so new, is it better for us to follow our competitors, or should we just get in and make our own path, just figuring that everybody else is trying to figure it out too? What we found in our research is that in smooth AI implementations, executives are closely watching AI trends in industry, in government, and among competition. So it is really important to have your eyes up looking at what's going on around you. So with that said, Chris, I want to ask you a question. As you're looking at this from your role, were there any of these findings that didn't surprise you? And then along with that, were there any that maybe seemed counterintuitive to you that you weren't expecting?
Thanks, Scott. I love the research too. I'm a geek at heart, and the numbers sang to me. A couple of things that popped to my attention is in the initial slide when you're discussing broader contours of what we realized on adoption and deployment. It struck me that the third, fourth, and fifth points we're talking about organizational wide deployment, set up the expertise across the organization, and so on and so forth. But the second bullet in that slide said, nevertheless, individual-led choices are possibly the key to success. And for me, that combination must keep a few IT heads awake at night, saying, wait, you're talking about AI and you want to let them choose? Can't this be a big wave like before? And I love the fact that then the subsequent slide, when he spoke about the fact that leaders are looking not just within, but they're looking at regulators, they're looking at competition. I think that speaks to the maturity of the business universe, if you like, on digital transformations. They're realizing that this is not the wild, wild west where I do what I think is best for my org. This is a context where if I'm taking a driving analogy, I have to have driving skills, but I also need to have road sense to find out where is the other traffic going, where are the roads getting constructed, where are possible choke points. And I think that's a very positive message in my head. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Great point. Um, it's interesting, and we'll actually get into a lot more of these findings as we go on throughout this. What I want to do here was just to provide that sense of what were the headlines right from the beginning. So I do want to get in and explore the actual research. So we'll have some additional conversations that will follow on here. So let me get back a little bit to that idea about AI and organizations. And I think one of the first things we need to understand is how we're going to go about looking at AI and what it means and how we frame it in our approach. So when I think about that, you can go to somebody and ask that question, hey, are you implementing AI in your organization? But my question is, what does that really mean? Like if somebody says they're implementing AI, we may not be clear on it. Sudeshna, I see that you've got your hand up.
Before we move on, I was just
Yes.
got a question which was relevant to this section. Is like somebody has asked that there appears to be an apparent contradiction that centrally managed AI and of the projects is coming up as something which is more working more. But how does that work with your individual choice of tools? Uh,
Yeah. Yep. Um, Great question. And I think what we see is that there's actually, um, even though we see these higher numbers, we really do find that it is a balance. And I think you can still centrally manage a rollout, but still give people that ability to look at what tools they're going to be bringing to the table. So I think it is a matter of looking at both what's best for the organization as well as for the individual. We'll actually get into talking about that because we're going to see that it's a balance between different levels of the organization and what they're trying to do, along with what individuals need to accomplish. So it's a very insightful question. And I think it is a balance and finding that balance. Yeah, thank you. Um, so this idea of implementing AI, there can be ambiguity in this space when somebody says, oh yeah, we're implementing AI. And it's kind of that idea that if I say, okay, I'm going to build a house, Krish may have in mind a house that he thinks I'm going to build, and I may have in mind something totally different. It's similar to this image that I have up there to say, so is that a duck or a rabbit? What are we seeing here? And based on your interpretation, you might see one or the other. So I want to give you some ways that we think about AI integration within the organization. First, we look at this concept of tailored technologies. So these are specific mission specific applications or tools that you'll bring into the organization that have an AI component to it. So we're going to bring in, let's say it's a Copilot or it's a Chat GPT or it's some specific technology that you're bringing into the organization to accomplish a specific goal. So that's one side of how we look at it. There's this other side, though, that looks at these pervasive proficiencies in AI across the organization. This is more about the capability building. So do your people know how to write prompts? Do they know which AI tools might be better suited for which situations? So we kind of look at when we're integrating organizational AI, we look at, again, those very specific use cases and then the pervasive proficiencies. Let me give you some examples. I won't go into all of these, but for example, in a National Weather Services organization, the Prosci I was working with, on that tailored technology side, they're using AI to take atmospheric data and to transform that into actionable insights. So that's an example of the technology that's tailored to what they do in their organization. Now, on the other side of that, in the pervasive proficiencies, they're also training all of their employees to be able to use these generative AI tools. So they're addressing the technology piece as well as that proficiency across the organization. The regional bank, they've got AI-powered chatbots, but they're also offering these workshops and e-learning courses to familiarize employees with AI tools in general. Urban hospital, diagnostic imaging and predictive models that are being used with AI, but at the same time, they're also providing this AI training to bring people along in the organization. So that's one way to think about it: tailored technologies and pervasive proficiencies. Now, the other point I want to make here is that implementing AI is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is one thing that I saw come out clear in the research. We kind of have this tendency to believe that we can just come and bring AI into the organization and say, there you go, it'll fit all of us. And that's just not the case. So the way that we look at it is through three different lenses. We look at the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level. The individual level is all about that personal integration of work. So how is it helping individuals to do their work at a higher quality, less time, less mental strain, more enjoyment in what they're doing? When we look at the team level, it's more about how are they using AI to collaborate, to improve their communication performance and solving problems at the team level. Then when we move to the organizational level, that's really those big strategic initiatives to say across the enterprise, how can we drive innovation and differentiation through AI? So again, some examples of this might be that in that healthcare setting, you've got a healthcare data analyst who's using an AI tool in their individual work to enhance their own work. In that same organization, maybe you have a customer service team that has adopted these chatbots and they're seeing improvements on their team. And then at the organizational level, maybe you're seeing that they've got like this big health tech system where they're adopting AI to streamline how they're serving other people. So again, those two concepts of ways to start thinking about AI in your organization. First, tailored technologies versus those pervasive proficiencies. And then breaking it down to say, we've got to look at individual AI adoption. We've got to look at team AI adoption, and then we've got to look at organizational AI adoption. Krish, I'm curious, in your mind, as I talk about these different approaches to AI and thinking about AI in an organization, what are some of the possible implications that you see of that? So like, how might you apply it or think about it differently if you're helping an organization in a change effort?
Multiple ways, Scott. This is cerebral popcorn, right?
Yeah.
Two, three thoughts that popping into my head. One, I think the value of having tailored technologies and pervasive proficiencies, preferably in that order, is helping individuals in the organization believe in the organization's commitment to adopt AI as a technology. When I have tailored technology and the organization is saying, this is how we're going to work with our vendors, with our customers, with our X and Y and Z, it tells the organization that AI is serious. And hence, we need you all to have this, and we're going to support it, sustain it. It gives that message far more credibility. So I do think I'm tempted to believe that there should be that order, preferably, right? In fact, on the flip side, I'm worried if it becomes pervasive, it could be like how we all adopted social media. We all thought we got good at it, but our role using social media is very different from me, the person using social media. And we are still struggling to understand that difference, right? So for that reason, it does feel to me that organizations swiftly moving to a committed vision on where I go with AI is important, right? And in that storyline, on the individual team adoption and the organizational adoption, I love what we said in Prosci some times back. I remember you had said that we need to declare what can be put in, what do you do with what comes out, right? And both are important, right?
Yep.
Which systems can you use? In which places can you play this game, right? So I think, again, the individual adoption with those guidelines is possibly the way forward. This is not everyone now has office productivity software, start using it. It's not something like that. In a way, Scott, what I'm thinking is expertise does not going to drive a proficiency. Usage is going to drive proficiency. So there's only so much you can get done in the training room. You have to let people play with it and then industrialize it. So it's going to be iterative. Did all that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think the first part of what you were saying goes back to the question Sudeshna had asked from an attendee about like that order, because if we're going to go out and just let everybody just run wild with it, then who knows what will happen. So there does have to be some sense of governance and control. And again, we'll see that in the data. But also, I loved what you pointed out, that the tailored technologies are a way for the organization to show their commitment to say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to jump into it, and then we'll figure it out. We'll get in and we'll experiment, and we'll see the importance of experimentation as we go on and get into the actual data. With that said, let's actually jump into the data itself. This is, I think we've talked about the headlines, and we've talked a little bit about ways to approach it, think about it. I want to get in and discuss specifically what the research was that we were looking at. So we always start with questions, and I feel so fortunate in my role to just be able to ask those questions about whatever we're looking into. And with AI, we had a couple primary questions. The first question was, when individuals show up to the workplace, how are they experiencing the AI in their work? What is that like for them collectively? And then second, we wanted to understand, what are they thinking about the way their organization is approaching the AI implementation? Do they agree with it? Do they not? Do they feel like it's too much, not enough? Where are they with it? So these are some of the key questions that we really want to answer. Once we know the questions, then we've got to figure out, how do we collect this data? So in this case, we worked through a third-party research firm. We went out to 1,107 respondents. I will put a caveat on this, that these were respondents from the US. And I point that out because I think that's an important differentiation, that I don't want to make the assumption that it's just the same across every region, because there are going to be different levels of maturity in this AI space. So I do need to put that out up front. Specifically then, these 1,107 respondents, 525 of them were frontline employees, 389 were team leaders, and 193 were executives. So we asked all of them about their experience with individually using AI. Then we went on, and for those who were team leaders, we asked them additional questions about how they were using AI on their work teams. And then for those who were executives, we asked them a separate set of questions about AI and the enterprise. So with that, if we go back to this question of, at the individual level, we really want to understand like how in these smooth implementations where it's going well in an organization, what is that experience for individuals? So these were a couple of the questions that we asked individuals. Um, right now, it's important to just know the categories, the types of questions that we asked them. It was about how are they being introduced to AI? How are they learning about AI? What about their experience when they go to interact with AI and actually use the AI systems? Is that favorable or is it not? And then we also want to know at the individual level, do they trust AI? Do they trust the outputs? There's always that question of like, okay, it's telling me this, but how do I know it's accurate? And we want to get behind that. So here's a little more detail about how we did this. So across all of the individuals, we went in and we asked them these questions. So you can see under the introduction and learning, for example, tool choice. Who chooses the AI tools you use at work? And then on a semantic differential scale, they then selected between, well, my organization chooses a -2, or I choose as a +2. And you can see the other questions like motivation. I use AI at work because I have to versus because I want to. You can see the next question about experimentation. Is it strongly discouraged or is it strongly encouraged in the organization? So these in and of themselves, it was interesting to kind of just look at the averages here, but where it got really, really fun and exciting for me as a researcher was when we started looking at these same responses, but we did an overlay of some different questions that we had asked. So what I mean by that is that when we then started looking at those same responses, but then said, okay, now what's your role in the organization? Are you frontline? Are you a team leader or an executive? Then all of a sudden we started seeing these differences in how they were responding to those items. So like if you look at that tool choice one, that was a fascinating one to me. Executives were saying, oh yeah, I get to choose the AI. Front lines were saying, I don't get to choose the AI. You know, a different experience for them. We have to be aware of that when we're approaching change, that it's not the same experience for different levels of the organization. Um, if you look at that one about experimentation, executives reported that they received more encouragement to experiment and to try AI than frontline employees. So, Chris, you had talked about that experimentation earlier. And I think that is one of those barriers is that frontline employees, maybe it's that they feel like they don't have permission to experiment. And so one thing as a change leader that change leaders can do is to really encourage that explicit permission to go out and experiment with it, to try it. So some of the key findings here, we also see that executives have these more positive interactions and emotions towards AI in general. So they feel like it's a little easier to use, it's more helpful. They actually show that they're more positive towards it and have more trust in AI than the frontline employees. So interesting to me to see those differences, the variations in role. Now, the other question that we asked here, that again, as a researcher, I love when we see data like this. We asked a question about, so how do you feel like the implementation is going in your organization? Is it going slowly with difficulties and not well at all? Or is it going really smoothly? Is it going really well? And then when we plotted those things, we again start to see these distinctions between what smooth rollouts look like and what struggling rollouts look like. So essentially, these start to become some of the conditions of these successful AI implementations. We can see that in those smooth AI rollouts, they encourage experimentation. So that's that third item down, and you can see that's a pretty big difference. That's where we see also the individual choice of AI tools that had come up earlier. This is where we see that data point reflected. This idea that AI use is required beyond individual desire alone, that's kind of an interesting thing. So as an organization, we're not just going to say, hey, you can really choose whether or not you want to use it. Here, the organization is actually coming in and saying, no, it is a requirement. We do have some standards. I go back to that original question. What a great question about centrally managed, centrally controlled versus individual. And it is finding that balance. There does have to be some governance. And then we also see the strong or the structured organizational learning where that supports AI adoption and not just letting people go on it at their own, but having some formal way for people to learn. Um, so, so Chris, as you look at these, um, my question here is: are there key moments that have, when you think about your personal use of AI, what was it that kind of helped you? Were there key moments as you've been leaning into this space a little bit?
The most simple answer I would give is the most prominent driver of my second use of AI was a reaction to the first use of my AI. Was I kicked in the butt or patted on the back? Right. So there's an almost direct correlation with did I burn my fingers, scared my tongue or not? So that's one broad comment I would make. Scott, I would also like to sneak in the fact that in the Indian context, as we practice this storyline, as we deploy AI-based tools in this part of the world, a couple of facets that are worth calling out is there's a high degree of data literacy. Uh, I think that, and that's function of many of the digital transformation changes that have been happening. There's a high degree of AI literacy because AI ML has been a thing over here in this part of the world for a longer time than anything else. So people are comfortable with the fact that it is AI and how it works. A lot more people have worked on an embedded AI. They worked on AI in context of ML and machine language in terms of machine learning, sorry, in terms of NLP and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of work already that's happened. And Gen AI is the democratization of AI. It's that the average Joe can start using AI.
Yep.
But to that extent, we are finding in organizations a far greater adoption, far lesser concerns around adoption at the end user level. The broad comment I would make, agentic AIs are very, very strong in this part of the world. So that's just FYI from India, what's happening. So in that context, I think the key moments that have contributed to my personal use is how easy I found it to transfer my knowledge more than anything else. It's not just that, hey, look at what I found. It's, hey, look how easy it is to use it, and we can all do it. That moment, I think, was my personal, I got it kind of moment. Sudeshna is calling for our attention. Sudeshna, over to you.
No,
Sudesh.
Yeah, so thank you. So we are getting a few questions since we are talking about the personal use of AI at work. We are talking about it being like, how it is talks to security or data security. And we are getting a few questions on that. So would you like to clarify that?
No.
Any of you?
Chris?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So couple of nuances over here. I just mentioned data literacy. I must acknowledge the fact that all of this is happening with business leaders in organizations being more sensitive about the nature of data and the nature of the importance of governance around IT systems, right? Compared to a decade back, the CTO has lesser gap with other business leaders on how important it is to classify data, hold data, data lake conversations, data warehouse conversations. A lot of data conversations have occurred. So I think business leaders in general are more understanding and receptive around governance requirements. The problem is, what are governance requirements over here? That I think is a continued challenge, right? Hence, which systems can I use? There is a natural need to let AI adopt and adapt to different workflows for different functions. Hence, we are saying in this conversation, and hence the research is pointing out that individual-led choices are important. Different AIs are good for different things. We should let different functions and different leaders in that functions choose which combination works for them. So there is that organic part of the organization gathering those insights. Gathering those insights is important. Not just make it happen, but figure a way out to get these together, say in a community of practice, say in a community of some form. That's one part of the storyline. The other part of storyline is just regulatory, right? There's one regulatory which comes from Where does my organization sit? Where does this legal entity sit? Can the data pass borders? So that's one kind of regulatory. The other kind of regulatory is what my board requires me. Do I put my data into someone else's servers? Do I put my data into someone else's machines, right? So I think my point over here is I think business leaders are receptive to CTOs giving them the directions. I don't know if CTOs have this granularity of direction to provide. But I do think uh, at this point in time, there is less likelihood, I'm knocking wood over here,
Yeah.
that people are randomly going to put very confidential data. But yes,
Yep.
Gen AI, the Gen AI part of the whole AI game is the dangerous one in this whole list. That's the easiest one to, let me just redraft this proposal, and all of a sudden, private information is out.
And Chris, I would add, we're going to get to a little bit of governance and
Of course.
control when we start talking about that enterprise piece and what executives are saying about that. I want to be really attentive to the time here. So I'm going to move on to our next question because I want to make sure that we can hit at least an overview. One of the other questions we had is, what are the biggest challenges that users are facing? And how do those vary when we start looking at the roles? Um, so it was interesting to go out and to ask and to see that the top uh, challenge that people faced was just that user proficiency. So this is mastering the AI tools and feeling like they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to get into it. Krish, I thought that was an interesting observation that you were saying as a whole, in India, that's probably a very different issue because there's probably a certain level of comfort. So it may be some of these other challenges that would resonate better within India. Um, the second one was technical challenges, and these are all about how do we actually integrate this into our current processes, into our current tools. So looking at those technical connections, we can see that organizational adoption comes up as number three. And that's the one that we've talked about from a change management perspective, that you can go and install the tool. And this is what Daryl Connor says. It's not about technical installation. It's about benefits realization. And those are two completely different things that we need to be attentive to. And then you look at data and information quality, trust and reliability, ethical and security concerns. I won't hit these much, but if you look at the top right, there's a breakdown where we start asking different groups what's most important to them. So like when we look at user proficiency, we can see that team leaders and frontline employees, that was a little more important to them than it was for executives. The technical challenges, so how we actually integrate our systems, that was more of a challenge to executives who were really focused on that than team leaders and frontline employees. Organizational adoption, that was primarily the frontline employees, whereas kind of that concern and that challenge of how do I use this. Data and info quality, primarily a concern for frontline employees. Trust and reliability, that was highest with team leaders. And then when we look at the ethical and security concerns, that was really executives who were spending more of their time focused on those types of concerns, which makes a lot of sense for me. I think that's appropriate to look at the executives taking ownership for those types of conversations. I think on this next one, if we can be just pretty quick in this conversation, but what challenges have you noticed? Like Krish, what do you see in your context with AI?
Quick, short one is definitions. I think when I love the fact that individual contributors, employees are worried about data quality. And I think definitionally, the team leader is going to hold the individual contributor, the employee, responsible for a certain outcome, right? So now, who holds that particular responsibility when you're dealing with a customer-facing role, right? I think the implications of using AI on moments of truth, right? I think that's perhaps what's hitting the headlines, both the wins and the losses. Surprisingly, I find businesses fairly open to manipulating AI in whichever way you want. Do the magic, fiddle around with it, break it, we can fix it. That's not the problem. What all can you do with it? But I think the team leaders are left holding the responsibility of, but don't mess up a relationship, don't get a customer bugged. And I consider that a concern. Does it make
Yeah,
sense?
and it does, and that team leader role of being kind of in that middle seat where they need to represent the organization and what the executives are saying, and then also they've got the challenges of those frontline interactions that they have to balance. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Um, Now, one other question that we want to look at here is how do individuals then, what were their thoughts about how the organization was using AI? And this is where we get into that governance and control conversation. What was their experience and what they were seeing coming out of the organization? We also asked about like what was the general approach in organizations to AI and implementing it? And then were there any additional organizational dynamics and influence that were at play? So you can see a few of the things when we talked about like governance and control, which I think had come up in that data security. Um, we asked about data openness, for example. Are you extremely cautious about what data can be used with AI, or are you very open? And we see here that overall, it's pretty much balanced. Like saying, yeah, it can't be to one extreme or the other. There's got to be a balance. And then when you look at like the control, is it completely to use okay to is it completely okay to use any tool you want, or is it only allowed with approval from your organization? Do we have some of these parts where you have kind of this covert AI going on in the organization? So again, this in and of itself is really valuable to look at these. But when we go in and say, if we really want to focus on those smoother AI rollouts, what are we seeing are the distinctions? And what we see, there are a couple of them that I've got over on the right-hand side, and this is by kind of the degree of separation, the gap size. We see that the wider expertise and open decision making lead to smoother AI adoption. This is where we see those big transformative changes that are driving more success more effectively than those small ones. This concept of measured openness with data, and I think that phrase is really important, is measured openness. It's not going to go to one extreme or the other. We can't lock down the data and say, no, you absolutely can't use any kind of data unless it's blah, 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 whatever it may be. But at the same time, we can't have everybody just using whatever data they want. It's got to be that measured piece. AI systems operating autonomously perform better. I thought that was kind of an interesting observation when the AI systems can work entirely on their own. And then AI initiatives led by leaders succeed more often than those driven solely by workers. Like we know that from a change management perspective, that active and visible sponsorship, when you've got your leaders who are in doing things, that makes a tremendous difference in the outcomes that we're looking at. So if we're to look at these findings, are there any of these that you think would be the most difficult for organizations?
I love the fact that this section, Scott, has it had the phrase organizational dynamics and influence. I think it brings in culture in some form or shape. It's how does this organization naturally tick? And I think, for example, if I'm a process-centric organization, right, and many organizations out here are process-centric, in which case this kind of innovation might be would be very difficult to implement, right? And in which case I'm seeing those items that you listed as contributors to smoother AI deployments as levers. It's like suddenly I'm not in a car, but in an aircraft cockpit, and I got a lot more buttons to press, right? But I think the challenge over here is, in this section at least, what resonated with me is there is a big risk that what you're trying to do runs contrary to how your organizational rhythm works, how your organization talks to
Yep.
each other, how the organization's information flows and decisions get made, right? AI can be very disruptive on that in the speed at which it can independently take decisions. And I'm talking again agentic AIs, right?
Yep.
Not just the prompt-driven ones, but it can go ahead and start running things smoothly than it was done before. I find it instructive that organizations are using AI-driven solutions in the operations teams. BFSI is using it, healthcare is using it, education is using it. very many places that are labor and hence conversation intensive are using this. And I do wonder, will that get in the way of sharing insights, right? So it feels like an accordion. With ERP, we
Yep.
move to a place where everyone gets the insights. With AI, it's everyone gets the results. And I'm wondering whether it'll get difficult to implement, difficult to explain for a senior leader. This is the vision, this is what we're trying to do. Did all that make
Yeah,
sense, Scott?
you were saying earlier too that challenge, and it's a common one in the change management space of but this is the way we've always done it. And AI fundamentally challenges that basic premise
Yep.
of the way things have always been done. Like it's, I think that's why AI, in some respects, it is the same as a lot of other changes, but it's also different from any type of change that we've experienced. And I think that's one of those areas where it's going to fundamentally challenge a lot of the ways that we've become comfortable with working.
God, I might just sneak one more
Yeah.
thing, which
Yep.
is back to that tailored versus pervasive conversation. I think another thing that might probably walk in as a challenge from the back door is the tailored technologies often are coming from HQ. The pervasive technologies are happening at
Locally.
different legal entities globally, yeah,
Yep.
locally, right? Uh, do they clash for attention, budget, resource, glory? Do they clash for glory, right?
Interesting.
And that's possibly another rock that we are kicking down the road, a stone we're kicking down the road. The organization needs to, at some point, decide which way its bets are going, right? Are we
Yep.
are we looking at the communities to develop the expertise for the organization, or am I doing the big investments for these tailored technologies?
Yep. And from a Prosci perspective, we talk about the importance of um, identifying your success outcomes right at the beginning and
Yes.
ensuring that there's alignment across the organization to what those are. So whether you're in headquarters or whether you're in one of the more local distributed offices, that you're still aligned to what we're trying to accomplish with this AI thing. That in of itself would be a fascinating conversation to just say, what is our goal and intent with AI? Yeah, that alone would be fascinating. Um, so let's just jump a little bit, and I know that we do want to have some time for some Q&A, but I don't want to let this opportunity go by without talking about how executives are thinking about AI and AI adoption in their organization. Specifically, if you are going to be engaging an executive in this conversation, this is a little bit of what's on their mind. What are they thinking? And so I would look at this as kind of a way that I can start talking with them in their language and their priorities. So we asked executives about how they're managing AI from a strategic perspective and also an operational perspective. We asked them a little bit about skill development and what their plans are across the enterprise for that. How are they going to build AI capacity in their organization? And then finally, we asked that question about where should you be looking in terms of those external and competitive influences that might be driving the use of AI? That's where you start looking at things like government regulations, looking at industry, looking at what your competitors are doing. And here's what we came out with. Again, you can see the same rhythm here of like how we asked the question. So the strategic and operational management, the first item, AI decisions in our organization are driven by immediate needs versus long-term plans. Are we just responding and reacting to what's going on, or are we really taking that longer-term vision? Is the AI management decentralized and spread out, or is it centrally controlled? So again, these are interesting findings in of themselves. But when we look at the difference between struggling and smooth implementations, that's where we start seeing those conditions for successful AI implementations coming forward. So centrally controlled AI management, that is associated with smoother rollouts. Again, those larger transformational implementations, that also shows up here. We see again that strong leadership support. Number one top contributor to change success for the last It's been the last 25 years, probably the last 13 studies that Prosci has conducted. The top contributor to success is active and visible sponsorship. It applies here the same as anything else. That supportive culture and what that means of people saying, we collectively are supporting this AI implementation, building those internal skills more effectively than relying on external. So I don't know that AI is something that you can completely have consultants come in and say, this is how you need to use it. That it's really got to come from that. Let's internally build this capability that we see associated with those smoother AI rollouts. And then again, just that attentiveness to those external forces, things that are going on around us. What are the government policies that we need to be attentive to? What are competitors doing? What in our industry in general, what are the trends that we're seeing AI? We're seeing that when executives are attentive to those, that they report that they have smoother rollouts in their AI. Now, these are just a couple things that I want to point out to give you more kind of talking points with executives. So like when we ask them, why is your organization using AI? You can see some of the highlights. It's operational efficiency. We want competitive advantage. It's to help us make better decisions, quality and accuracy, customer experience. You can see some of their biggest challenges, organizational change. So that change management piece and workforce capability. What's interesting is if you take those two and add them together, you're ending up with well over half that are those people related issues that the executives are struggling with. And then how do you know if AI is helping in your organization? Another way to think about this is like, what are the success metrics? What do you look at? Okay, operationally, is it improving my performance? Are we making more decisions based on data that we can now access that we couldn't before? What about efficiency and productivity? What is the financial impact? So just little something to think about when you're approaching executives. They're likely to resonate with these. This question, I think for the sake of our time, because I think we're about, we've got about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I would rather, if we can, just jump to kind of those next steps. And the next steps really here, I think the key is we've talked a little bit about the what. What findings were key takeaways, but we've also started leaning into that idea of, so what are the implications? Because that's where it matters. So what do you do with this information? When you go back to your organization, how do you make sense of it? And then we look at the now what might we do differently because we look at these key findings. And so with that, Chris, I'll just kind of turn it back to you or wherever we need to go to lead it from here and land the plane.
Sudeshna was saying, let me take the mic. It got intercepted.
Yeah, I think this is a topic where I think the way the questions are also coming in, it is not enough to discuss in an hour, and we would like more. And before we take up this question, Scott, thank you very much for staying up late for us, and I know how passionate you are about this topic. So yes, we would just like to kind of share with the rest of the audience here that we cannot wait to have you in here on the 5th of August for our event. Here we will have event sign-ups, which is on AI and change management. So it is not an hour anymore. It would be the whole day we would spend on this topic. And I hope, we would get all our answers. But as you said, we'll take a few questions before we end. And that would be one is, again, something which we all have the challenge of is, why is that AI we know is complicated and it is a change which is coming in, and organizations are still not realizing the gravity of the change management strategy and initiatives on AI implementations. Are you seeing the same thing, the pitfalls in the real world about the same thing?
Yeah, and the way that I think about it is that it's maybe like if I'm out here hiking and I see the mountain in front of me and I climb that. When I get to the top of that mountain, I see there's another mountain behind it. and another mountain and another mountain. And right now, I think the mountain that a lot of people are climbing is generative AI. They're just thinking, oh, this is a fun tool that I can go in and create a poem about whatever I want to. And I think that's kind of where the limits of the thinking are today. But the difference that we need to start orienting to is how do we actually make AI a collaborative partner in our most strategic decisions, where it really becomes we think about AI more as a really smart intern, like somebody who we can actually give responsibilities to do meaningful work. And when Chris talks about the agentic AI and starting to look at that, I think it's just a matter of maturity that we're looking at the small, safe things. But as we grow to get more comfortable with that, we're going to start seeing people extend into these advanced uses of AI. We're seeing that a lot of people aren't there yet. They're just not. They're pushing towards that.
And another question, that what can change managers do better with AI, and what would be like, the how would their approach be different with AI?
So first, going back to the data that we've talked about here, I would hope that they can encourage like experimentation, encourage people to get in and to just use it, to start having the experiences that they need with it. Now personally, from a change management perspective, I frequently use AI. Like I will frequently use it to say, I am working with this kind of a context, this kind of organization. This is my challenge. I know at Prosci, we have one tool that I really appreciate that's called Kaya, which is our AI tool. And what's great about that is we have all of our research that we've done that's on the back end of that. So that when people are trying to ask, I'm trying to put together a change plan for this group in this situation, what recommendations do you have? They get the AI that is informed by the research, and they're getting very tailored direction in the outputs of those. So those are some of the opportunities. I think it's just getting in and experimenting with it and seeing how you can fit it into your regular process of work.
Thank you. I think we would have the time to do one more question, and as always, we are taking your questions, and we would get them answered individually. If we have missed any, we would be taking one last question. And as Krish, you had touched upon this, but still, this was asked that when you are talking about the research on AI or this, are you meaning only? What are you meaning? AI, you're meaning ML, you're meaning Gen AI, you're meaning agentic AI. Now, has the research also covered all of it, or how have we done it?
So there are a couple of nuances over here. The research talked about AI. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't limit it in any form or shape, right? We have to acknowledge the fact that Gen AI is in top of most individual contributors' mind. And organizationally, when a leader says AI, they're talking about AI in the most visual forms that they have done. They have already been investing into embedded AI for a long time into their tools and technologies. And now they are seeing the organization getting involved. Going back to Scott's example, now it's not just me hiking up the hill. I'm also seeing many hikers behind me on their own. I didn't even call them, and they've just turned up. So I'm saying, well, it looks like we can all climb. Let's all do it, right? So keep in mind that, yes, there are different AIs, and that's what Scott was referring to earlier. When he said AI, it could be different kinds of houses, different kinds of sizes. So that's one commentary I would make, that the research is reasonably agnostic to populating people's mind on what am I speaking about, to forcing them to respond about this version of AI or that version of AI. That's one comment I would make. I think the bigger takeaway for us out of the research is the fact that it's not like Excel, where I can tell you VBA macro, here are a bunch of rules. It's more like, say, Canva, or it's something a little more creative, if you like. It's not going to be a rule-based system that we're offering the organization, whether it's agentic AI or whether it's Gen AI, whichever form it is, or with any other variety of AI that we're talking about, it is no longer rule-based. And in that environment, how do you leverage the people who are using it without compromising the organization's data and the larger goals? That's the question the research report is trying to answer. In my head, quite honestly, from a CM perspective, the biggest advantage and the disadvantage we have is people are leaning into AI. The good news is that people are leaning into AI. They're not as scared as many thought they would be. And that's your pro and your con. The pro is obviously they're leaning into it, makes your starting friction lower. The con is it makes it easier to underestimate the need for change management. Did that
And
make sense? Yes, Scott,
yep.
please.
And Sudeshna, I would just add that you hit it right on when you said there is so much research that we have in this space, and what I've shared with you there it would be a 3 hour, 5 hour, 7 hour. There is so much. One of the initial questions, we actually did a different research project that was about a year and a half ago. So a year and a half, 2 years, like right at the front of AI starting to come out. One of the questions we asked is, what are you using AI for? And this is a longitudinal study that we're now looking at. And initially we saw a lot of the generative AI stuff coming up, but we did see glimpses of people starting to say, I want to use it for my strategy development in my organization. I want to use it for data analysis. And I'm guessing that what we're going to see as we track that longitudinally, that we're going to start seeing this flip happen to more of those higher order applications of AI. So we are trying to be agnostic in the approach, as Krish had mentioned, and we do have some data on that. We just simply couldn't get that into an hour webinar. I wish there's so much that's just so exciting in this space.
Absolutely, and as again, I'm sharing my screen for we can't wait for Scott to come down here and be a part of the one day and give you way more information and way more understanding on where AI meets change management. And for all you change managers there, keep writing to us, give more questions. What will help you more so that we can incorporate it as much as possible in our event of the 5th of August, where we would also get our definitions clear as to what will a AI org adoption really look like, how will proficiency there look like. So I think that is what we need. And thank you, Krish. Thank you, Scott, once more for this with us. And
Thank you.
it's not the end, it's just the beginning. We are waiting for the 5th of August where you are here. Thank you so much, Scott.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Krish.
Thank you, everyone.